Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the golden sands and sun-bleached silence of ancient Persia, where the wine somehow is always cool. Imagine this. The air is bone dry and hot enough to bake flatbread on a rooftop, yet before you sits a ceramic goblet sweating gently, filled with chilled pomegranate wine. You're surrounded by arched stone walls that trap the breeze just right, and somewhere, out of sight, there's a system at work that would make your kitchen refrigerator a little nervous. Of course, you probably wouldn't survive a day here. Between the merciless sun, the lack of SPF 50, and the fact that plumbing hasn't exactly hit its golden age, let's just say it's not quite spa conditions. Still, there's something beautifully ingenious about the way these ancient engineers fought nature's furnace with architecture, science, and a whole lot of patience. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto a sun-washed street somewhere near present-day Yazd. The cobblestones are warm beneath your sandals, and the air smells like clay dust and saffron. A faint rustling breeze filters through an alley, carrying with it the faintest clink of ceramic jars. You follow the sound, rounding a corner, and there it is. A courtyard dappled in shade, framed by slender pillars where an elderly man in a linen robe pours a deep red liquid into a cup. He lifts the jug back into a shadowy nook where, impossibly, the vessel remains cool to the touch. No ice truck, no electricity, no cheating. You shuffle closer. The man eyes you with the kind of tired hospitality earned only by desert dwellers. He gestures. It's wine, he rasps, cold, from the mountains. You blink, baffled. Wine doesn't stay cold out here. Not unless, not unless someone wanted it to. The Persians, as it turns out, very much wanted it to. In a land of brutal heat and relentless sun, cooling your drink wasn't just a luxury. It was a status symbol, a scientific pursuit, and sometimes an art. Over the centuries, they developed clever methods to harness the cold, methods that used air, water, geometry, and, in one delightful case, a really big dirt dome. But this early sip of chilled wine is just a hint. Because the full story starts further back, miles away and thousands of feet higher, where snow still lingers in shaded crevices, and men with wooden sleds and thick beards hike across frozen slopes with the solemn dedication of people transporting treasure. And in a way they are. Their treasure? Ice, snow, coldness itself. These chilly bricks, packed in woven reed baskets, are destined for the cities below. They'll spend days being gently carted across desert paths under cover of shade and camel hide. By the time they reach their destinations, royal courts, rich merchant homes, bustling roadside inns, they'll have shrunk but survived. And they'll be hidden inside something marvelous, the yakhchal. You don't see the yakhchal just yet, but you do notice how people move around the courtyard with deliberate slowness. They know how to stay cool, physically and mentally. You're the only one sweating through your robe like a tourist in wool socks. Someone fans a pot near the corner. It's half buried in the ground, wide at the bottom, narrow at the top. The breeze sweeps over the mouth, making a low, whistling hum as it slips across the opening. Wind trap, a nearby child whispers to you, then runs away giggling. A wind trap. You tilt your head. The pot seems oddly designed, almost like it was built to funnel air. You file that one away. Historians still argue whether these passive cooling methods were fully understood by their original users, or simply results of trial and error over generations. But either way, what they achieved was impressive. Entire systems, from clay jar design to architectural layout, were subtly tuned to fight the heat. Back in the courtyard, the old man offers you another cup. This time, he pulls it from a shallow basin of water lined with stones. It's noticeably cooler than your sweaty palms. A trick of evaporation, maybe. The breeze catches the water and poof, your wine chills. You lift the cup to your lips. The wine is sour, rich, and slightly gritty with sediment, but definitely cool. Maybe not fridge cold, but still pleasant. Unexpected. As you sip, the man hums to himself and adjusts a thin fabric screen hanging above the inner walkway. You realize it's been angled to block direct sunlight, but still let in the breeze. Intentional, purposeful, designed. Every detail here whispers the same thing. Cool is king. Later, as shadows grow long and the earth exhales its dry, dusty breath into twilight, you recline beneath a tamarisk tree, eyes half closed. From here, the entire courtyard feels like a living machine, an open-air engine of shade and breeze, geometry and patience. And at the center of it all, a quiet understanding of heat's stubbornness and a deep cultural desire to tame it. Of course, this is only the surface. There's a bigger system at play. Roads that link mountain to market, structures that hide ice from sun, philosophy that links coolness to virtue. But for now, you lean back, your fingers wrapped around a pleasantly chilled ceramic cup, and wonder, if this is how Persians relaxed in the desert, what other tricks did they have waiting down the line? One thing's for sure, tonight you're not leaving until you find out. Tonight, you wake up early, or more precisely, you never really slept, not with the occasional desert fly doing low passes by your ear. But the moment you rise, there's movement beyond the courtyard wall. You peek past a wooden gate and catch sight of a line of camels swaying down the dusty road like ships rolling over a beige sea. Each camel carries tightly wrapped bundles, some slung low in the heat, others perched carefully atop baskets lined with insulating materials, woven reeds, rawhide, even layers of packed straw. The caravan leader waves lazily at you as if this heat is no big deal. His turban is soaked with sweat, his robe dusty and worn. But his precious cargo? Untouched by the sun. You follow at a distance, squinting under your borrowed head wrap. The camel train ambles along the famed royal road, the spine of the Achaemenid Empire, once stretching over 2,500 kilometers, from Susa in the heart of Persia to Sardis in western Anatolia. Built under Darius I, this was no mere path. It was an imperial artery. Messages sent via mounted couriers could cross it in just a week, an ancient postal service that put Pony Express to shame. And today, it's also a wine route. Persians didn't just drink wine, they celebrated it. It flowed at feasts, ceremonies, quiet garden gatherings. And it wasn't just local vineyards sending their offerings downriver. Wine traveled. From mountain terraces to arid lowlands, the best vintages moved in clay amphorae, goatskin bags, and even for the finer stuff, inside carved wooden flasks sealed with wax. You pass a caravan stop, a roadside rest area that might as well be the ancient version of a gas station. Except instead of questionable hot dogs and neon lighting, there's a shaded awning where a man tends to a pot of grape syrup, thickening slowly over embers. Next to him, a few travelers unwrap their packs and take out small ceramic jugs. Some are buried slightly in the earth, where the temperature dips a precious few degrees. You watch one of them open a flask and pour out a silvery red liquid into a chipped cup. Steam doesn't rise from it. It's already cool. Mountain shipment, one of them says, not looking up. Brought down 2 nights ago. Still holds chill if you bury it right. Historians still debate whether this level of temperature control was widespread or only reserved for the elite. While royal courts and satraps certainly had access to elaborate cooling methods, rural caravans and even modest traders seemed to know a thing or two about how to keep their wine from boiling in its jug. Whether it was through clever insulation or simple know-how passed down across generations, the desert didn't always win. You sit on a low stone bench and sip from a shared jug offered by a passing cook. The taste is tart, but oddly refreshing, almost like something between vinegar and plum juice. It was better last week, the cook shrugs. This batch rode too close to the camels' backs, got warm. so wine could spoil or just disappoint. There were countless ways to get it wrong, especially without refrigeration. But when it was right, it sang. And when it was cold, even slightly, that was luxury. As the sun climbs, the caravan pushes on. You decide to walk alongside a younger traveler, a boy about 12, leading a particularly fussy camel. He explains that his job is to keep the wine crates damp. He dips rags into a water skin and drapes them over the jars. The breeze does the rest. Evaporative cooling. You smile. Even if the boy doesn't know the science, he understands the practice. The outer layer dries in the wind, and in doing so, pulls heat from within the vessel. It's basic thermodynamics, dressed up in mud and wind. Up ahead, you catch sight of another merchant balancing a jug in a clay sleeve. He stops briefly at a small brook cutting across the path, dipping the jar into flowing water for a minute or two. Just enough to refresh it. This ritual might not drop the temperature dramatically, but psychologically it helps. And out here in a world without chilled metal tumblers and countertop ice makers, every degree counts. You crest a rise, and for a brief moment you glimpse the horizon, flat, wide, and humming with heat. But in the distance, faint and soft like a watercolor dab, is the outline of snow-capped peaks. That's where it all starts. Snow gathered in spring, ice cut and stored, chilled goods descending slow and steady by caravan and camelback, an ancient cold chain. The journey continues. You pass postal stations and roadside inns, each with their own version of desert hospitality. Some offer melon slices soaked in rose water, others only a damp cloth and a look of tired pity. But always someone, somewhere, is either protecting the cool or chasing it. By mid-afternoon, the caravan finally veers toward a shaded grove. A natural spring bubbles here, just barely. The water's cool, tinged with minerals, and surrounded by flat rocks, bleached pale by centuries of feet. Here the group rests. The wine is unpacked. A few precious containers, sealed tightly, still cool from their mountain origins, are opened like treasure chests. Sips are taken, eyes close. Someone even sings a song about the breeze, off-key and half asleep. You rest your head against a smooth rock and close your eyes. The camels sigh beside you. Someone's pouring more wine into a cup wrapped in cloth. A gentle gust lifts dust into lazy spirals. And for just a moment, you feel it. The desert, yes, but not oppressive. Just waiting. Waiting to be outwitted, one cool sip at a time. Your dreams last night were cool, literally. Streams ran beneath your eyelids. Snow fell in slow motion, and the wine from yesterday seemed to pour forever, always just on the brink of icy perfection. When you wake, it's with a start and a snort from a camel. The caravan has long since moved on. Only the prints remain, half smudged in the sand. You're no longer in the flatlands. The road has shifted upward, steadily gaining altitude. The air is thinner, and even though the sun still presses down on your shoulders, there's a sharpness to the wind. In the distance, the Zagros Mountains stretch like the spines of a sleeping dragon, white at their highest peaks, dark and pine-speckled further down. You hike now, following a set of narrow switchbacks. The ground beneath your sandals crunches with gravel, and the air smells of resin and melting snow. This is where the cold lives. Not in fridges or fans, but in the dense silence of shadowed crevices, in the hidden bowls of wind-carved hollows. And somewhere among those peaks, ice harvesters do their work. They're known by many names, most of them lost to time, but their job is as straightforward as it is exhausting. They collect snow and ice from the upper slopes, pack it tight, and transport it down the mountain before the sun eats their efforts. Simple, right? Except for the part where it involves dragging frozen slabs through desert terrain without anything melting, breaking, or falling off a donkey. You find the crew just before midday, a few dozen men in thick robes, loading what looks like snow into giant baskets. They've dug out a small glacier, carefully scraping layers with flat wooden paddles. the ice packed into rectangular blocks. A few laugh and toss handfuls of snow at one another, their fingers red and stiff. The joy is short-lived. There's work to do. Each block is first wrapped in a layer of straw, then encased in animal hide. This multi-layer packaging doesn't just insulate, it breathes, letting small amounts of air in and out, preventing condensation from ruining the load. The result? A weird ancient cooler backpack. Not exactly Yeti brand, but hey, it works. You try lifting one. It's like hauling a wet boulder. You settle for walking alongside one of the younger men instead, watching him test the ropes on his donkey. He tells you they'll walk through the night when it's cooler and rest during the hot midday. Ice doesn't like direct sunlight, but if kept in shade and constantly rotated, well, the block could survive for days, sometimes weeks. Historians still argue whether these ice runs were a regular trade route or more of a seasonal royal commission. The record is fuzzy. Some ancient texts mention ice for the king's wine or snow brought in casks to the palace, but others treat it like a novelty, something extravagant, not every day. What's clear, though, is that the people up here knew what they were doing. They had storage pits dug into the earth, lined with clay and ash, designed to preserve chunks of winter well into spring. Some were communal, shared by villages for food preservation. Others were strictly guarded, reserved for the elite. The pack train begins its descent. You follow cautiously. It's treacherous terrain, and the donkeys know it better than you. Occasionally someone slips and there's a tense moment as everyone watches the bundle. Is it still wrapped? Still cold? Did the straw break? At one point, the caravan pauses in a sheltered rock alcove. Here, beneath an overhang, they've constructed a makeshift snow cellar. A small circular pit, maybe 5 feet wide, sunk into the earth. Its walls are packed with stone. Its roof a crude wooden lattice covered in earth and reeds. Inside, it's dark, silent, and cold. The temperature is at least 15 degrees cooler. You duck inside and feel your breath fog slightly. This, the leader tells you, is just a way station. They'll store ice here during their descent, allowing for smaller shipments to be managed as needed. If the lower valley has a yakhchal, this is its distant cousin, a snow checkpoint, keeping the product stable on the way down. And that's when it hits you. This isn't just survival. This is logistics, a supply chain, an ancient network of cold. You emerge again into sunlight, blinking and sweating. The men joke that you're soft. Desert-born can't handle mountain cold. Maybe they're right. You can barely feel your nose. Later that afternoon, as the sun begins to soften and cast golden light over the stones, the caravan reaches the forest edge. The mountain gives way to scrubland again. The hardest part is over. At the tree line, they meet another group, desert merchants. There's a quick exchange, some gruff greetings, and then the real work begins. Ice is handed off quickly and carefully. One man inspects a bundle, tapping the side with a practiced knuckle. It sounds solid, still good. The caravan will continue into the lowlands, toward the cities. Some ice will go to noble houses, some to royal kitchens. A few lucky crates will arrive in time for a midsummer festival, cooling down the wine of those who've never seen snow with their own eyes. You sit on a stump, exhausted but fascinated. One of the ice workers offers you a sliver of snow packed inside a fig leaf. You pop it into your mouth, and for a second, the mountain lingers on your tongue. Cold, sharp, and impossibly clean. And as you watch the desert begin to reassert itself, hot wind blowing dust across the slope, the trees growing sparser, you realize how delicate this whole operation is. A balance between elements, a race against time. But for now, at least, the chill holds. You followed the ice, the wine, and the weary donkeys. Now, the trail leads you towards something truly strange. A giant, dome-shaped mound poking up from the desert floor like a giant, half-buried acorn. From afar, it looks like the work of wind and time. A hill, maybe, or an odd rock formation. But as you get closer, you notice it has purpose. Design, symmetry. It's a yakhchal. The word means ice pit. And while that might sound like something from a minimalist doom metal band, it's actually one of the cleverest passive refrigeration systems ever devised. You stand before it, shading your eyes. The dome is about 60 feet tall, built entirely from a special mortar called sarouge, a mix of sand, clay, goat hair, lime, and ash. It's waterproof, and more importantly, heatproof. You circle it slowly. There's a narrow doorway, just large enough to duck through. Inside, the air changes instantly. Gone is the buzzing, dusty heat of the midday sun. Here, it's cool. Still, a little damp even. The floor sinks below ground level into a vast pit where, in cooler months, ice collected from nearby mountains or made from freezing shallow water overnight would be packed layer by layer, interleaved with straw, covered in ash. You take a deep breath. The walls curve upward like the inside of a seashell. Every line leads your eyes toward the apex, a point so high above you, it almost disappears into shadow. Sound behaves differently in here. Softer, swallowed. It's like being inside a giant, sleeping clay creature. You brush your fingers against the wall. It feels like stone that has forgotten the sun. Here, ancient engineers worked with the environment rather than against it. The dome's shape minimized surface area exposed to heat, while its thick insulation protected the contents inside. Even the underground pit wasn't just for volume. It kept the core below the frost line, where temperatures stayed reliably low year-round. You spot a small grated shaft running up toward the dome's peak. It's a ventilation tunnel, cleverly placed to allow hot air to rise out while cool air is drawn downward from shaded entrances. Another yakhchal trick? Thermal stratification. Hot air exits, cold air stays. Even now, if you listen closely, you can hear a faint hum of air currents sliding through unseen vents. Historians still argue whether yakhchals originated under the Achaemenids or emerged later during the Sassanid or early Islamic periods. Some date surviving structures as late as the 16th century CE, but older references hint that the practice of desert refrigeration is much older, perhaps even Bronze Age. As always, the paperwork is spotty. You lean against a low shelf carved into the interior wall and close your eyes. In the darkness, you can imagine the space full, layer upon layer of ice, salted meats, stored fruits wrapped in palm leaves. And, of course, the wine, kept at just the right temperature, ready for royal tables, noble feasts, or a particularly smug priest with a taste for pomegranate reds. Outside, the sun glares on, oblivious. But in here, time slows. Temperature obeys. Eventually, you leave the cool sanctuary, blinking into the light. The heat hits your face like a velvet slap. You glance back at the yakhchal, still silent, still standing. You're led by a local engineer. Well, enthusiast is probably the better word. Down a path to a slightly smaller dome, recently restored. He beams as he shows you around. This one's no longer in use, but his ancestors used it up until the mid-20th century. For storing fruit, he says. And yes, sometimes drinks. He winks. You didn't hear that from me. You ask him how people froze water in the desert in the first place. He nods knowingly and leads you to a walled courtyard beside the dome. It's shallow, tiled with dark stone, and open to the night sky. At first you don't see the point. Then he explains, radiative cooling. On winter nights, especially dry, cloudless ones, heat escapes quickly into the night sky. Water placed in shallow pans within these courtyards would freeze overnight. No electricity, no sorcery, just physics and patience. By morning, the thin ice would be gathered and packed into the yakhchal, bit by bit, night by night. A whole season's worth of chill, stored for months to come. Of course, it only worked under the right conditions. Clear skies, dry air, low humidity. And it took effort. But for centuries it worked. You sit near the empty basin, imagining the ancient scene. Workers in long coats scraping ice into woven baskets under a full moon. Breath fogging the air, each pan of ice a little victory over nature. a kind of alchemy where the sun gave heat by day and the stars gave cold by night. The engineer hands you a ceramic flask. Inside, surprisingly, is chilled rosewater. Not cold like a refrigerator, but definitely cooler than the air around you. Stored underground, he grins. Traditional method. You sip. It's floral, faintly sweet, with the metallic tang of clay. You feel the cool trickle down your throat, anchoring you in this strange, wonderful overlap between science, history, and craft. All around you, there are ruins. Older domes now caved in. Mossy vents, cracked tiles, but even in their decay, they whisper ingenuity. These weren't crude hacks. These were thoughtful, layered systems. Persian engineers weren't fighting the desert. They were dancing with it. You look once more at the yakhchal, its curved silhouette framed against the afternoon haze. It doesn't speak, doesn't hum. It just waits, cool and eternal, like it's got all the time in the world. And suddenly you feel cooler too. You leave the shadow of the yakhchal reluctantly. The sun outside feels like a betrayal now, hostile, full of petty vengeance. But the path ahead promises something equally intriguing. Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire, and home to some of the most sophisticated banquets history has ever known. The name itself feels weighty. Persepolis. A place where columns rise like petrified giants, where staircases whisper stories through their shallow carvings, and where wine, remarkably, was often served just a little cooler than you'd expect in the middle of the desert. You wander into what remains of the royal kitchens, vast stone courtyards framed by crumbled walls, scorched slightly pink by the afternoon light. Once this place buzzed with the clatter of copper pots, the shuffle of sandaled feet, and the clipped commands of kitchen overseers who probably never cracked a smile. Here's the fun part. Persian cuisine wasn't just dates and lamb. It was complex, multi-layered, and, especially in elite circles, obsessed with temperature control. You pass what might have been a pantry, its earthen floor still scored with drainage grooves. A few yards away, a sunken chamber suggests storage, perhaps a pit lined with stone, once used to keep perishable foodstuffs cool in baskets. A young steward, plucked from your imagination, walks past you in a spotless white tunic, balancing a clay tray filled with little ceramic cups. He's muttering to himself, likely because he knows what happens if he spills a drop. These cups are headed to a diplomatic tasting session, one of many held during the Nowruz festival, where envoys from across the empire came bearing gifts and expectations. You follow the tray into the great reception hall, where foreign ambassadors wait in carefully arranged discomfort. The Assyrian seems bored. The Lydian is fanning himself. The Scythian, predictably, is sharpening something. But all eyes light up as the wine arrives. It's poured ceremoniously into shallow goblets, and the first sip, cool, not cold, but definitely refreshing, earns appreciative nods. You sneak a seat beside a diplomat named Artabanus, who seems both exhausted and entirely at ease. He glances at you sideways, then slides over his goblet. "Try it," he says. "It's from the north, snow-cooled, traveled in the dark." You sip. It tastes of pomegranate and something smoky. Oak, maybe. There's a mineral crispness, like it touched snow recently. "How?" you ask, pointing vaguely in the direction of the sun. Artabanus shrugs. Ice pits, yakhchals, and donkeys that don't ask questions. This banquet isn't just a meal, it's a performance. The Persians believed in showing power through control of land, people, and yes, even temperature. To serve a chilled drink in the desert? That wasn't just comfort, that was political theater. Historians still argue whether these feasts were carefully orchestrated diplomatic events or more ceremonial pageantry designed to impress and intimidate. The truth is probably a little of both, but one thing's certain, nothing was accidental. That chilled sherbet you're handed next, flavored with saffron and spiced with cardamom, didn't end up at your table by luck. It was planned, prepared, preserved, and possibly even prayed over. A servant places a shallow dish of crushed fruit before you. It glistens in the torchlight, still cold, faintly steaming in the hot air. It's an early prototype of faluda, a kind of Persian sorbet made with thin rice noodles, rosewater, and syrup, often kept cool using yakhchal ice or snow packed in bowls. You spoon it into your mouth and nearly forget where you are. It's that refreshing. Sweet, perfumed, and astonishingly cool for a palace kitchen built centuries before refrigeration. Someone spills wine behind you. A small commotion erupts and the steward goes pale. You glance back at Artabanus, who simply sips again and says, "That's going to cost him dinner privileges for a week." The feast continues. Between courses, dancers perform slow, hypnotic routines. Musicians play stringed instruments that sound like water dripping from clay. You feel yourself swaying slightly, not from the wine, but from the gentle rhythm of the setting. Everything is soft, precise, curated. At some point, a debate begins between two scribes. One insists that the snow used in the palace must come from Mount Sabalan, while the other argues that it's stolen from the peaks above Ecbatana. You listen, amused as they bicker about snow quality like modern coffee snobs. Sabalan has the purity, one insists, but Ecbatana's ice carries the wind spirit. You let them argue. Your goblet is full, your pulse is slow, and the air carries a coolness that doesn't match the desert beyond the stone walls. Somehow, some way, they've made it work. Persia, the land of blistering suns and scorching winds, has found a way to chill. As the feast winds down, you walk among the quiet columns of Persepolis under moonlight. The warmth of the day is still trapped in the stone, but a breeze glides through the ruins like a whisper. Somewhere, far away, another caravan is beginning its descent, bringing fresh snow to the desert once more. And in that moment, it feels like history isn't something long ago, it's something preserved. Like a sherbet that stayed cold, long after the ice should have melted. The next morning greets you with the kind of sun that doesn't rise. It explodes. The light hits the side of your tent, like a furnace door swinging open. You peel yourself from the linen mat with a groan and fan your face using a broken palm frond, wondering why the gods thought it wise to put their personal sauna in Persia. But relief comes not from the heavens, rather from the buildings around you. As you wander into a residential quarter just outside the ruins of Persepolis, something becomes clear. These aren't random houses, they're planned, positioned, designed to breathe. And the deeper into the city you walk, the more ingenious it all becomes. You pass through an alleyway where the air, while still warm, carries a curious softness. You round a corner and find it, a tall, narrow tower rising above a modest home, with vertical slits that hum faintly in the morning breeze. This is a badgir, literally a wind catcher. And it does exactly what it sounds like. The structure channels breezes from above down into the living quarters below, where they're guided across damp surfaces or open pools, cooling the air by evaporation before it ever touches a human cheek. These passive cooling towers are Persia's answer to climate control, nature-powered air conditioners. You step into the house and are immediately greeted with a drop in temperature. It's not dramatic, you won't need a sweater, but it's enough to stop the sweating. The interior is dimly lit, thick-walled and quiet, with low couches and copper trays bearing melon slices and cool rose water. Your host, a middle-aged woman with nimble fingers and a fan tucked into her sash, gestures toward the ceiling. "The wind dances," she says, smiling. "We just give it a place to rest." You sit on a cushion and tilt your face upward. The airflow isn't strong, it's subtle, like a cat brushing against your cheek. But it's consistent. And when paired with the earthen walls and stone floors, it makes the room feel like a cave someone decided to decorate with potted plants and delicate glassware. Outside you hear a shout. A small group is unrolling woven mats along a trench beside the house. "Ah," your host says, "they're fixing the Connaught line." You blink. Connaughts again. The underground water channels that whisper through the desert like secret veins. You're beginning to see the interconnectedness of it all. Water feeds the cool air. The air slips through the tower. The tower breathes life into a home that otherwise might melt under its own rooftop. You step back outside and follow a narrow stone path to another building, a merchant's house with a more elaborate badger system. Here, 4 towers rise like organ pipes, each angled slightly differently to catch breezes from multiple directions. Clever. The interior of this home is positively chilly compared to outside. On a low table sits a clay water jug wrapped in a damp cloth. It's part science, part tradition. The evaporation from the cloth helps lower the water's temperature inside. Desert fridge, the merchant tells you with a smirk. You sip. It's not ice cold, but it's definitely cool. And considering it's pushing 40 degrees Celsius outside, that's a small miracle. Historians still debate whether the use of wind catchers predates the Achaemenid period or emerged later as urbanization increased. What's more fascinating is how widespread they became, not just across Persia, but into Egypt, the Arabian Peninsula, and even parts of India. Wherever the heat hit hardest, bad years followed. But back to the present, or, well, the distant past present you've wandered into. A teenage boy runs past you with a bundle of mint tied in string. He pauses, noticing your confusion. For the pool, he says, pointing toward the house's atrium. The breeze picks up the smell. Sure enough, when you follow him inside, you see the bundle floating in a small pool at the room's center. The air smells faintly green. Clean, fresh. You plop down on a cushion and watch the sunlight filter in through a carved lattice window. Dust dances in the rays slowly like it's trying not to break a sweat. A servant appears with a tray bearing small clay pots of Doug, a yogurt drink diluted with water and herbs. You sip. It's cool, sharp. Exactly the kind of thing a desert brain needs to reboot. And as you lean back, someone begins telling a story. It's about a palace that was so well designed, even in the middle of summer, the queen would wear wool indoors. Maybe an exaggeration, your host admits. But the idea was we mastered the heat. That's the Persian story in a nutshell. Not just survival, but elegance in adversity. If the sun wants a fight, Persia doesn't punch back. It just builds taller wind catchers and sets out another pot of sherbet. You pass the rest of the afternoon lounging like a sleepy diplomat, watching shadows crawl across the floor, listening to the gurgle of water, and occasionally lifting a damp cloth to your forehead for a little extra chill. Everything around you hums with quiet innovation. Architecture not as ornament, but as shield. Not decoration, defense. Later, as the day edges toward dusk, you climb the steps of a tower and look out across the rooftops. Dozens of badgers rise into the sky like desert periscopes. They don't move. They don't buzz, but they breathe, and that's enough. Somewhere far off, you hear the rustle of another yakhchal stirring in the wind. You think of the snow harvesters, the wine bearers, the stewards at court. And now this, a civilization that designed its very homes to outwit the sun. It's almost enough to make you forget you're still sweating. Almost. You wake not to the sun, but to the scent of spiced lamb roasting slowly in a clay oven. Somewhere nearby, someone is pounding dough, and there's a sharp, happy whistle that might be a tea kettle, or just an old man doing his best bird impression. Either way, it smells like a picnic day. You're in the desert again, but not alone. It's the 5th century BCE, and today is a day off. Or at least a day when pretending to work involves a lot of sitting on rugs and chewing olives. The noble you've somehow fallen in with, possibly because you complimented his sandals, has invited you along on a short trip just outside the city walls. You travel by cart, the kind pulled by oxen and decorated with surprisingly fussy tassels. Inside, under the shade of a linen canopy, you recline on cushions with 2 other guests. A grumpy older woman who complains about sand in the grapes, and a teen boy who's definitely more excited about the snacks than the company. Eventually, the city fades behind you. Ahead lies a grove of slender trees, probably planted more for symbolism than shade, and a small garden surrounded by a low, mud brick wall. It's not an oasis, more like a desert cheat code, where clever irrigation and deliberate planting make green things grow. And in the middle of it all, a stone platform with a canopy. Your destination. The food is already waiting. A feast laid out on shallow trays and wide, low tables. Flatbread stuffed with herbs, pickled vegetables, stewed dates, almonds, and, of course, wine. Several ceramic flasks sit half buried in the ground, their necks poking out like the beaks of sleepy birds. A servant pats the earth around them gently, adjusting strips of damp cloth. You tap a flask. It's cool. The host catches your surprise and smiles. We buried them this morning when the ground was still sweet. Sweet. That's the word he uses. You crouch, brush the sand aside, and run your hand along the side of one jug. It's been packed tightly with straw and linen, the mouth sealed with wax. This one, he adds, rode down from the north in a leather sack filled with last week's hailstones. Historians still debate just how common this practice was, whether the cooling of wine at small gatherings was a privilege of the elite or a widespread tradition among prosperous families. Records suggest the nobility had the resources to do it routinely, especially in summer. For everyone else, a cool jug might have been a once-a-year indulgence, if the snowmelt gods were generous. You settle onto a rug beside the food. The servant hands you a chilled clay cup, wide and shallow. Inside, a deep red wine with flecks of mint floating on top. It's slightly gritty, ancient filtration left much to be desired, but it's cool. Not icy, but more than pleasant. Next comes the fruit. Slices of melon dusted with salt, apricots chilled in clay pots that were soaked and left in the shade. One bowl contains something unusual, frozenish slush like mashed ice and honey. Made last night, your host says, mixed with lotus root and grape must. You're about to taste it when the grumpy woman loudly announces she hates lotus root. Everyone ignores her. As the sun climbs higher, the group grows quieter. Full bellies, shaded heads, and a breeze that occasionally wanders through the canopy turn the feast into something slower. People lie back, pick at leftover bread, sip wine. One man starts telling a story about King Xerxes and his obsession with scented fans. Another claims Darius once had a grape imported from Egypt just to compare cooling methods. They buried it in snow for a week, he says proudly. The king said it tasted like a river in winter. Historians argue whether Darius actually said that, someone mutters. You don't argue. You're too busy watching a servant unwrap a tiny clay pot and lift out a single candied fig. It's glistening, sticky, and when you taste it, unexpectedly cool inside. He sees your reaction. Stored in ice, he explains. But only briefly. There's something magical about this moment. Not because of the opulence, but because of the effort. The lengths to which these people go for refreshment. Not just food or drink, but texture, temperature, timing. A small boy appears with a clay dish holding hailstones from a storm 2 days ago, packed with rose petals and lavender. Smell, he says proudly. You do. It's subtle, sweet, earthy. He grins like he invented cold. You glance at the host, who's fanning himself with a folded fan of reeds. Doesn't it all melt too fast? You ask. He nods. Yes, that's why it matters. Later, after several naps, the group begins to pack up. The leftover wine is carefully siphoned. Yeah, back into stoppered flasks, the emptier ones broken and buried. No one seems interested in hauling hot clay uphill. As the carts roll back toward the city, you glance behind at the garden. It looks ordinary again, no sign of chilled delicacies, no evidence of grape magic or slush miracles. Just dust, green things and shadows. But now you know. Beneath that garden, beside those trees, and inside those jugs, there was something ancient Persia cherished as much as spice or gold. coolness hard-earned and briefly held. You lie back in the cart, eyes half closed, and feel the faint breeze through the linen. The boy offers you another fig. This one's warm, sticky, far too sweet. And you miss the cold one already. You spend the evening reclining on the roof of a modest home, high enough to catch the wind that snakes between buildings. Around you, the city of Yaz glows orange and blue lanterns flickering, voices murmuring, pots bubbling, and open-air kitchens. The heat hasn't disappeared, it never does. But the rooftops offer a kind of truce between you and the air. Neither too warm nor too cold, but bearable. Just enough! A scholar sits beside you, rolling a smooth stone between his fingers, and sipping from a small jug of Seconjabina sweet and sour drink, made with vinegar and mint syrup. He's agreed to teach you something, but only because you brought melon slices. It's a fair trade. You want to know how it works, he says. Why the wine is cool. Why the food stays crisp. He taps the jug. It's not just magic. It's evaporation. And so begins your impromptu lecture in ancient physics, Persian style. He grabs a goatskin water flask and swings it gently in the air. This, he says, is called a mashk. Simple skin, sealed at the edges. But if you hang it where the breeze can reach and keep the outer layer damp, the water inside stays cooler. Why? Because as the outside water evaporates, it draws heat out of the skin and the liquid within. You nod. Sort of. He sees your squint and picks up a flat, wide bowl of water. He fans it with a cloth. Feel, he says. The surface temperature drops. Not dramatically, but enough in a... Faster evaporation means more cooling. That's why we use clay pots. Unglazed, porous. They sweat just enough. You think back to the jars buried in the ground at the picnic. Suddenly it makes sense. They weren't just hidden from sunlight, they were strategically evaporating. The surrounding cloths weren't decoration. They were ancient thermoregulators. Historians still argue whether Persian engineers fully understood the science behind this phenomenon, or simply observed and replicated what worked over generations. Did they have equations? Did they have results? Absolutely. The scholar hands you another jug, this one with a wider mouth and a rougher surface. This one we use for yogurt, he explains. It's thicker, denser, keeps the inside cool longer. You sip. It's tangy, sour, and just above room temperature cooler than you'd expect, especially considering it's been sitting in a woven basket for who knows how long. Now, he continues, the trick is not just the material, but the placement. If you store it near a windcatcher's mouth or in the shadow of a courtyard wall, the effect multiplies. That makes your brain hum in a good way. You think of layered systems. Water flasks placed in draft corridors, shaded rooms lined with brick and tile, rooftops where cloths are soaked at sundown, dripping moisture into air that's quickly swept away by nighttime breezes. Everything is strategic. The scholar gets excited now. He pulls out a thin sheet of parchment and sketches a triangle. See this shape? He says. It's the tower. Wind hits here, he jabs the edge, and drops. But only if there's an exit, like a window or a hole. You make the air move. And where air moves, you can use water. And where water moves? He trails off, clearly pleased with his own wisdom. Below, a vendor walks the alley, hawking habanera fruit drink, cooled in a covered well. Children follow him like sticky shadows. A few carry tiny flasks wrapped in wet cloth, bouncing happily in the heat. You ask about insulation, and the scholar pulls a folded bit of wool from under his cushion. This, he says, wrap a pot in this and soak the outer layer. Put it in the ground or inside a shady room. The cold holds. It's so simple, it's brilliant. No metal, no wiring. No hum of machines. Just materials, air, and time. He grins. We don't fight the heat. We distract it. A breeze lifts his sleeve and he fans his face theatrically. Of course, it doesn't always work. Sometimes the wind refuses to cooperate. Sometimes the humidity ruins everything. And sometimes the cat knocks over the whole flask. You laugh, and so does he. The moment softens. The moon rises and the rooftops shimmer in its glow. You realize this is more than engineering, it's culture. A deep, generational understanding of how to live with the heat, not despite it. A group of women on a nearby roof begin humming a lullaby as they wring out cloths and hang them over clay jars. You watch as the breeze lifts the damp strips and flutters them gently. Tomorrow morning, those jars will yield water a few degrees cooler than it was tonight. Just enough. Later, as you lie on a cushion with the scholar's explanations circling your head like lazy moths, you feel a damp cloth pressed gently to your neck. Someone chuckles. The ultimate Persian cure for heat stroke and bad poetry. And maybe it's the breeze. Maybe it's the mint. Maybe it's the goatskin flask whispering against the wind. But for the first time in hours, you feel cool. Not cold, not chilly. Just cool enough to sleep. You're walking again, feet dusty, robe clinging, mind fogged from the heat and the late-night yogurt lecture. But ahead of you, tucked between the gentle curve of a dune and the glint of a distant Qanat outlet, is a curious sight. A man seated beneath a canopy, scribbling furiously into a scroll, his tongue caught between his teeth in the universal expression of deep overthinking. It's Herodotus. Okay, fine, not the Herodotus, not exactly. But let's just say you've time-traveled into one of those charming narrative loopholes where the father of history happens to be visiting Persia, trying his best to understand the empire he so frequently misunderstood. And today his target? Wine, chilled, of course. You settle beside him, watching sweat pour from under his curly hair. He's managed to perch a small parasol over one shoulder, though it keeps tilting to the left. Next to him is a half-empty goblet of not quite warm but definitely not cool wine. He scowls at it like it insulted his mother. I don't understand, he mutters. It was cold this morning. You nod sympathetically, passing him your own flask, which thanks to your growing savvy has stayed pleasantly cool inside its damp leather sleeve. He takes a cautious sip, blinks, stares. By the gods, he whispers, scribbling something that might translate loosely to Persians can trap the cold in leather. Or perhaps Greeks really need to up their insulation game. He's not wrong. The Persians knew things. Knew how to harness the desert, to twist wind and water into cooperative forms. Meanwhile, Herodotus, despite his best efforts, is struggling to wrap his Greek brain around the logistics of chilled beverages in 40 degrees Celsius heat. You explain yakhchals, wind catchers, and snow caravans in simple terms. Half gesture, half pantomime. He nods slowly, pretending to understand, while secretly writing, "Some claim the Persians bury their wine to keep it cool, though others believe it is the work of spirits beneath the earth." Historians still argue whether Herodotus truly grasped the depth of Persian engineering, or if his accounts reflect the wide-eyed wonder of a tourist dazzled by indoor plumbing and fancy headgear. Either way, he wrote it down, and in doing so, preserved little fragments of the Persian cold chain for future nerds to marvel at. As you sit together, he flips through his scroll, reading aloud snippets of what he's written. They drink wine diluted with snow. They consider heat a weakness of character. Their slaves fan the pitchers constantly. You raise an eyebrow. That last one feels suspect. He shrugs. I may have embellished. Around you, a small midday banquet is assembling. A minor noble cousin to someone important, no doubt, is hosting a visiting Babylonian delegation. There's chilled wine, yes, but also other heat-sensitive items. Soft cheese wrapped in fig leaves, pickled fruits, and one bowl of what can only be described as proto-jelly. Wobbly, suspicious, somehow still holding form. Herodotus watches as a servant unpacks a small crate of ice chips, packed tightly around a jug of Sirka vinegar concentrate, used for cooling sherbets and mixing summer drinks. The Greek gasps. They carry winter in a box, he mutters, scribbling faster now. Impossible. Genius. Possibly sorcery. You ask him what Greeks use to chill their wine. He blinks. We add cold water? You nod slowly. Nice. There's a silence. Then he sighs. I'll admit it, they've won this one. A servant appears and offers a chilled mixture of honey, tamarind, and snow. You both accept. It's sweet, tangy, and so cold it hurts your teeth in the best way. Herodotus visibly tears up. This is better than conquest, he whispers. You recline beneath the canopy, watching the scribe argue with himself over whether to credit the ice to mountain slaves or divine intervention. Around you, life in the Persian Empire hums on. People fanning clay pots, carrying baskets of dates cooled under damp reeds, brushing their faces with mint-soaked cloths. You realize something. This isn't just about temperature. It's about control. In a land where nature dominates, being able to chill wine isn't just a flex, it's a quiet, calculated triumph. A sign that for once humans have wrestled a small victory from the heat. Herodotus finally stops writing. I shall tell the Athenians everything, he announces. They will mock me. Then they'll demand snow. You laugh. Then he laughs. Then a gust of wind tips over his wine. You hand him your flask again. Thank the Persian spirits, he mumbles. And just like that, you're lounging in history's footnotes, sipping something cold in a place that shouldn't allow it, beside a man who never truly understood Persia, but at least got the wine part mostly right. You leave Herodotus muttering to himself about ice demons and invisible snowbirds, and wander toward the outskirts of the settlement. The city thins into scrubland. The air thickens with silence, and the terrain begins to slope ever so slightly downward. Barely noticeable at first, but soon you realize you're following a decline, not a path. Before long you see it, a dark, arched entrance carved into the earth, framed by stones blackened from centuries of sun exposure. A man with a rope around his waist ducks into the hole, disappearing into shadow. Without hesitation, or perhaps without thinking, you follow. And just like that, you're inside one of ancient Persia's most astonishing feats of engineering, the qanat. It's not a tunnel in the way most people imagine. It's narrow, claustrophobic, damp. You can't stand upright. Your feet slosh in a shallow stream of cold water that murmurs steadily through a channel carved into the earth. Above you, wooden braces creak quietly in the dark, and the air smells like minerals and old dust. The man ahead of you chuckles at your expression. First time underground? He asks. You nod. Don't worry, he says. This qanat's been here longer than your memory, and it still flows. The qanat system is the invisible backbone of Persian civilization, an underground network of tunnels and channels used to transport water from mountain aquifers to distant parched lands. But these weren't just for irrigation. No qanats were also key players in Persia's cooling network. Here, the temperature drops dramatically. The walls are cool to the touch, the water even cooler. You crouch and splash a bit onto your face. Relief floods you. It's the kind of cold that makes your scalp tingle. The man leads you further. You notice vertical shafts carved every few meters openings to the sky, allowing light and fresh air to enter, while also providing access for maintenance. Through one shaft you spot a sliver of blue sky and a speckled pigeon, doing its best impression of a bored god. Historians still debate whether qanats originated in Persia or further east in the highlands of modern-day Afghanistan. But everyone agrees that the Achaemenids mastered the system. These weren't amateur wells. This was a nation of hydrologists working in clay and stone. You reach a small chamber where the water widens briefly into a shallow basin. A woman crouches beside it, filling clay jugs. For the market, she says. We sell it cooler than the sky. You grin. She's not wrong. The water here has been shielded from the sun all the way from the mountains. It's not only drinkable, it's almost cold enough to fog your breath. And now the trick becomes clear. Qanats didn't just deliver water, they delivered cold. Many yakhchals were built directly above or near qanats. The moving air within the tunnel, guided up through vents and out of wind catchers, created a pressure differential that helped siphon cool air into rooms, homes, and storage pits. You remember the scholar's triangle drawing. Suddenly the pieces fit. Water flowing underground, wind passing through towers, and buildings constructed like lungs designed to breathe. One of the workers tells you how families would lower amphorae into the qanat to keep their milk or juice cool for hours. No sun, he says. No fire. Just the earth doing the work. You ask how far the tunnel stretches. He shrugs. This one, 30 kilometers. Maybe more. You blink. You walk that? He chuckles. Number we send the new guy. The passage narrows again, forcing you to walk in a crouch. You spot etchings along the walls, simple symbols, probably markers for workers or directional signs. You wonder how many generations of hands carved these tunnels, passed jugs through them, whispered jokes under torchlight. Eventually, you surface into a shaded garden. The transition from dark to light is almost blinding. But what hits you hardest is the sound birds chirping, leaves rustling, and the soft babble of a stream that flows right into a marble basin. A small cup sits nearby, resting on a damp stone. You lift it, sip. The water is crisp, refreshing. No hint of stagnation, no hint of age. It tastes alive. It tastes like silence made drinkable. You sit beneath a fig tree and close your eyes. Somewhere nearby, children splash in the runoff, their laughter echoing through the alleys. The garden is lush, impossibly so for a desert city. Vines twist around columns, and pomegranate trees lean toward the sound of moving water like curious guests at a party. This is Quonset life. Not just a utility, but a rhythm. A system that supports gardens, homes, kitchens, and yes, those cool clay jugs of wine that made Herodotus question his life choices. You open your eyes and gaze back toward the tunnel entrance. There's no sign of it now, just soil, stone, and an ordinary-looking patch of earth. The real magic, you realize, isn't what you see, but what flows underneath. And somehow, knowing that the water and the chill are always moving beneath your feet, it makes the heat above just a little more bearable. The sun is beginning to slope westward when you're invited, somewhat mysteriously, to an evening affair on the outskirts of town. You're told very little, just that it involves fancy people, cold things, and probably more peacock feathers than necessary. Naturally, you accept. When you arrive, you understand immediately it's a garden party, Persian style. Not a sleepy picnic this time, but a full-blown, perfumed, satin-draped social contest where nobles, minor royals, and every person who's ever bought an expensive fan come together to outchill one another, both in temperament and in literal temperature. A courtyard sprawls before you, sunken slightly into the ground to harness the cooling power of earth. Low pools filled with water lilies catch the fading light. Musicians play soft, stringed instruments while attendants waft fans the size of small carpets. And everywhere you see it. Ice. Not mountains of it. Just touches. Slivers. Symbols. A young noble struts past, holding a jeweled goblet with a single cube of mountain snow bobbing inside. It's barely survived the journey, already dripping down his wrist, but he lifts it high like it's a royal decree. Still frozen, he says smugly. From the Zagros. Another lady sips her drink through a thin reed straw, cooled not by snow, but by chilled ceramic beads nestled around the cup. Her companion, not to be outdone, presents a small melon carved into a flower, its hollow center holding what appears to be a slushie made of wine, honey, and pure theatrical ambition. You sit beside a low marble table covered in fruits, cheeses, and little glass bowls of things too delicate to name. Most have been kept cool using ingenious tricks. Stone trays spritzed with water every few minutes, clay bowls half buried in shaded earth, and dishes placed on slabs of porous stone soaked in Connaught water. Someone brings you a drink, bright green with flecks of basil, served in a metal cup chilled by being stored inside a copper-lined pit filled with snow and straw. It's electric on the tongue and almost numbing to the lips. Your server grins. Her husband imports snow in sealed urns, she whispers, just for the season. You look around. Every detail of this gathering seems engineered not just to impress, but to signal status through mastery over the one thing Persia makes everyone fight: heat. To be cool in any sense requires effort, planning, and usually a few very tired donkeys. Historians still argue whether this kind of status competition was as widespread among the upper classes as our records suggest. Was ice truly seen as a status symbol or simply a seasonal pleasure? Evidence points to both. Some tablets mention gifts of ice or snow being sent between estates. Others mention the construction of small ice domes for elite homes. And then there's the poetry. Yes, poetry. One nobleman is currently declaiming a sonnet about a crystal kiss upon a copper rim, which you realize after a moment is a metaphor for iced pomegranate wine. Naturally, you drift from conversation to conversation, picking up phrases that sound both ridiculous and delightful. His melon wasn't even cool, simply undrinkable. I told her, if it's not fogging the cup, don't bring it. We had snow from Ararat once, very sharp, almost rude. The fashion matches the drama. Tunics embroidered with icy blue threads, jewelry shaped like snowflakes. One noblewoman wears a necklace made from actual frozen rose petals suspended in tiny ice globes. You watch one melt slowly down her collarbone. She doesn't even flinch. Someone pulls you into a game, a contest of sorts. Each guest must present a cooling technique more elegant than the last. The first offers scented fans made from sandalwood and ostrich feathers. The second reveals a secret pocket in his cloak containing chilled almonds wrapped in fig leaves. The third, well, she simply gestures to her bracelet. Inside are hollow stones filled with frozen lavender syrup. For sipping, you pass. There's no beating that. You sit with a merchant who, to your surprise, remains unadorned. No ice tricks, no jeweled slush. Just a single clay cup, wide and plain. You ask what he's drinking. Water, he says. Not even cold? He smiles. It was pulled from the Qanat just before sunset. That's enough. If you chase snow too far, you forget why you needed it. His cup has condensation. It is cool, just not flaunted. You sip from your own goblet and realize he has a point. Around you, the party is a theater of chill, but in this moment, the simplicity of a cool drink at dusk carries a different kind of prestige. One not about spectacle, but satisfaction. Still, as the evening deepens, the final act arrives. Dessert. Servants carry out trays of ice cream, or rather an ancient ancestor of it. Frozen mixtures of milk, honey, rosewater, and crushed nuts, kept solid in bowls surrounded by compact snow. They melt quickly in the heat, forcing guests to eat slowly, reverently, as if each bite contains some holy mystery. You take a spoonful. It's floral, creamy, ridiculous, perfect. As stars bloom above and laughter swells in the courtyard, you recline again. Your cup is empty, your fingers sticky with frozen syrup, and your ears full of music. You've seen what it means when ice is status, when chill is clout, when cold becomes culture. And even as the night air warms and the ice melts unnoticed into the earth, you feel it. A little smug, too, because now you get it. Later that night, after the nobles have drifted away like melting snowflakes and the servants are left sweeping up crushed rose petals and abandoned melon husks, you find yourself wandering alone. Well, not quite alone. A soft voice calls from a torchlit corridor near the temple quarter. You walk like someone with questions, it says. Naturally, you veer off the path. You're nothing if not suggestible when tired and slightly wine-wobbled. The voice belongs to a Zoroastrian priest, his robe faintly glowing under the torchlight, his beard braided into orderly whorls. He's seated on a wide stone ledge, legs crossed, fingers draped over a scroll. You've seen the yakhchals, yes? He asks. Tasted the snow wine, sat under the wind towers. You nod. Good. Then you are ready to understand why it all matters. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a mild threat, but you sit beside him anyway. He gestures toward the stars. In our belief, he begins, fire is sacred, but so is balance. Heat must have its opposite. Flame must meet cool breath. The world is ordered in opposites, truth and lies, day and night, summer and not summer. Winter, you offer. He waves a hand. Names aren't important. What is important is that every action must restore balance. The chill in your wine? That's not luxury, that's harmony. He opens his scroll, not religious doctrine, but a list of temple duties, some scribbled notes in Old Persian, and a drawing of what looks suspiciously like a yakhchal cross-section. He taps it. Our temples used ice too, not just for food, for ritual, for purity. Cold water before prayers, chilled oils for anointing, snow to temper sacred fires when they grow arrogant. You blink. Fires can be arrogant? He chuckles. Everything gets ideas above its station eventually. He explains that in Zoroastrian cosmology, the elements are living, sacred forces, but they aren't all powerful. They're to be respected, channeled, not dominated. The fire altar must burn clean. The water must run cold and clear. And when the sun bakes the earth, it is the duty of humans to restore balance. Historians still debate the extent to which Zoroastrianism influenced environmental engineering in ancient Persia, or whether religious figures actively contributed to water management and architectural design. But oral traditions, temple layouts, and cultural values certainly suggest a deep reverence for coolness as a cosmic virtue. Chilling wine, the priest says, is not indulgence. It's correction. The sun burns. We soothe. That is the rhythm. He pours you a drink, not wine this time, but something herbaceous and deeply cooling, like mint syrup and snow. This is sepidab, made only during the solstice with snow gathered in silence. You taste. It's subtle, faintly sweet, cooling in that way that makes your teeth hum. The priest tilts his head. Even now, the fire sleeps below us. The hearth is never extinguished, but around it we build walls of shade, pools of moonlight, paths for wind. He shows you a diagram, rough, half symbolic, half architectural, of a fire altar surrounded by qanats and ventilation shafts. The temple breathes, he says. It sighs in the heat, and the wine we serve is cooled not just for the tongue, but for the soul. You glance upward. The stars are sharp tonight, pinpoints of cold light on a warm canvas. He smiles, noticing your gaze. The stars are the sky's ice. You sit in silence for a moment, the sounds of the emptying city echoing distantly, laughter fading, carts rolling slowly home, the occasional hoot of an owl with poor timing. He begins humming, a slow, circular chant that loops like water coiling in a basin. You lean back, head pressed to the stone wall, and listen. When you drink something cold in summer, he says finally, remember that someone climbed a mountain for that chill. Someone dug a tunnel. Someone watched the stars and said, Here we balance it. You nod, sleep tugging at your edges. He pats your shoulder. Tomorrow you'll remember this as a dream. But that's all right, we keep balance, even in dreams. And with that he vanishes, probably through a secret passage. Or perhaps just around a corner. You're too drowsy to care. You lie on the warm stone bench, hands wrapped around the cup of sepidab, now barely cool but still comforting. Balance. Fire and ice. Sun and shadow. Cold and clay. And a goblet of snow wine offered not to impress but to restore. Morning in the desert is not silent. It creaks, whistles, and sighs, like the world is stretching its joints. You wake to the smell of date syrup warming in the sun, and a quiet flurry of activity in the kitchens near the temple quarter. Someone hands you a cloth soaked in mint water. Someone else, uninvited, dabs your forehead and mutters, You look like a goat left too long in the sun. You smile because they're right. Today, you've been invited to witness what is perhaps the most delicate use of Persia's ancient cooling arts. Dessert. Yes, dessert, the last course, the fragile finale. That elusive moment when a meal becomes something else entirely, something ceremonial, celebratory, almost spiritual. You're led into a covered courtyard, shaded by layers of cloth, vines, and a roof vent that breathes cool air with every subtle shift in wind. Inside, the cooks are busy preparing what appears to be a date and walnut tower. Layers of mashed dates, almond paste, and rosewater syrup, all shaped with precision and stacked like a dessert ziggurat. And the kicker? It must stay cool, or the whole thing becomes a sticky, syrupy landslide. The head cook, an older woman with arms like pistons and a voice like gravel wrapped in silk, waves you over. You'll fan, she says simply, and don't touch anything with warm fingers. You take your place beside a bowl of snow-cooled almonds, slowly fanning the dessert tower as though it were a sacred relic. Every few minutes, someone swaps out the clay tray beneath it with a fresh one that's been resting in a qanat-fed basin all morning, On the far side of the courtyard, younger assistants are rolling saffron rice balls filled with frozen yogurt. Yes, frozen. Sort of. They mix crushed ice with thickened milk, honey, and cardamom, pressing it into shape before tucking it inside a warm layer of sticky rice. The heat melts the center just enough by the time it reaches the guest's spoon. You watch the juggling act unfold. One mistake, too much sun, not enough breeze, a broken clay pot, and the dessert fails. But when it works, it's magic. Historians still argue whether Persian cold desserts were everyday fare for the upper class or ceremonial treats reserved for festivals and royal occasions. Recipes for iced milk with fruit and snow sherbet appear in later manuscripts, but the techniques likely stretch far earlier. Handed down, refined, guarded like treasure. And make no mistake, this is theater. When the guests finally arrive, noblemen in pale linen, matrons with strings of pearls so long they could double as jump ropes. The desserts are unveiled with quiet, reverent flair. First comes the grape musk jelly, suspended in a shallow bowl of crushed ice. Then a melon orb, hollowed and filled with minty slush, glistening with condensation. Then the date tower carried in like a royal baby, fans flanking it on both sides. Then the date tower carried in like a royal baby, fans flanking it on both sides. You're handed a dish of faluda, thin noodles made from rice starch, soaked in syrup, served with a splash of chilled vinegar. It sounds strange. It is strange. But you take a bite and your tongue does a backflip. Sweet, sour, icy, herbal. Like summer itself, forgot it was supposed to be hot. A noble beside you raises her eyebrow and says, "Ours is better in Shiraz." You nod, non-committally. She's probably right, but this is plenty good for you. A servant refills your cup with sharbat, a cooled drink made from barberries and honey. Not quite iced, but cool enough to trick your brain into thinking the air has dropped 10 degrees. You ask one of the servers how they manage to keep so much cold available during a heat wave. He smirks. Qanat water, shadow work, and panic. You watch as a kitchen boy sprints back and forth between the courtyard and a small cooling shed. Inside, a yakhchal hums quietly. Not literally, of course, it just feels like it does. Inside it, tucked between layers of straw, are clay jars, cups of snow, and bundles of herbs kept crisp and fragrant. They remove only what they need, nothing more. Time is not on their side. Someone drops a bowl. The entire courtyard freezes. The dessert, a fragile confection of sweet cream, chilled in a wide copper pan, sits, tilted, still mostly intact. The head cook barks, "Oh, fan it!" And 3 people rush forward. Disaster is averted. The noble guests, unbothered. This is all part of the show. You sit again, dessert in hand, the heat mostly forgotten. You've been in deserts before. You've been hot, sweaty, miserable. But here, with faluti on your tongue and a soft breeze curling in from the wind catcher above, you feel calm, balanced. Cooling food in the desert isn't just about taste, it's about grace under pressure. And here, in the heart of Persia, surrounded by people who've made chill their art form, you find yourself cooling too. Not just physically, but spiritually. As the last of the desserts are served and the guests begin to murmur their goodbyes, you glance back once more at the date tower. Still standing, proud and glossy, a testament to sweat, skill, and several near meltdowns. You smile. Because honestly, you're pretty sure no one's ever fanned a dessert to sleep before. The sun is lower now, casting long shadows across the walls of Yazd and tinting the adobe buildings with the color of honeyed clay. You find yourself walking without direction, half digesting dessert, half chasing a breeze. But wherever you go, the air is warmer than it was. The yakhchals are quiet. The ice? Likely melted. The chill? Receding. And for the first time, you begin to sense the end of an era. You pass a crumbling wind catcher, once proud, now crooked, its bricks eroded by decades of wind and rain. Below it, a courtyard overrun with weeds. A cracked clay pot lies on its side, split clean down the middle. The door to the house swings open slightly in the breeze, revealing only dust and silence. Once this place would have echoed with voices. A clay jug would have sat half buried in the shade, sweating through its linen wrap, cooling water pulled straight from a kanat. Now it's abandoned. The windcatcher no longer sings. Persia's cooling empire, so vibrant, so precise, so elegantly tuned to its environment, has begun to unravel. You continue on, finding more clues. A dried-up kanat outlet choked with sand, a half-collapsed yakhchal dome, its crown sagging under centuries of neglect. In some places, modernity has crept in. Metal pipes, buzzing wires, humming air conditioners bolted awkwardly to ancient walls. You meet an elderly man repairing a shutter near one of the old domes. He wipes his forehead with a cloth, glances at your wandering eyes, and says, "She worked once. We stored ice here for my grandfather, but no one knows how to patch Saruj anymore. Too much work. Now we have fridges." He doesn't say it with bitterness, just a matter-of-fact shrug. The world moves, technologies shift, and the ancient methods, so interwoven with weather, community, and time, are slowly being unstitched. Historians still debate when and why Persian cooling systems began to fade. Some blame the Mongol invasions, others the rise of new cities and trade routes. Still others point to simple economics. Electricity is easier to control than the wind, and ice trucks can move faster than donkeys with straw-packed crates. You find your way to a ruined storage shed, once linked to a thriving yakhchal. A plaque beside the door reads, faintly etched in fading script, "Here was stored the winter's breath." You step inside. It's cool, barely, but not from engineering, just shade, just depth. The inner walls still hold a whisper of that ancient cleverness, but the mechanisms are gone. No ice, no airflow. Just quiet. You sit on a stone bench and close your eyes. The silence is heavier here. Not peaceful like before, but reflective. A little mournful. It's hard to imagine the grandeur now, the royal feast, the snow-packed crates, the kitchen boys dashing to swap chilled trays of almond paste before they turn to syrup. Now there's rust, cracked mortar, plastic bottles littering the floor. A boy pokes his head through the doorway. "You're looking for the old fridge?" he asks with a grin. You nod. He steps inside, barefoot, a small jug swinging from his hand. "We use it now for hiding from the sun," he says. "It's good for naps." And just like that, the dome is alive again. Not as a technological marvel, but as shelter, as haven. It doesn't chill wine anymore, but it still protects. Still gives shade, still breathes. You walk with the boy for a while. He shows you where the kanat used to run. "My uncle says you could hear it like a stream in the ground. Now it's dry. But we use the trench for planting sometimes." You ask if he knows how to build a yakhchal. He shrugs. "We have air coolers now. They buzz like angry bees, but they work." Then with a small smile he adds, "But my grandmother still hangs cloth over the pots. Says the wind listens better than wires." You smile back. Not all is lost. Persian cooling isn't dead. It's just sleeping in new forms. Pieces remain. A wind catcher rebuilt here. A family that still stores food in buried pots. Architects studying old designs for modern eco-buildings. Whispered knowledge, passed from hands to hands that care. You climb a hill at sunset and turn to look back at the city. Domes, towers, vents, all scattered like the bones of sleeping giants. In the twilight, they glow softly, like embers that haven't yet gone out. And down below, a boy pours water into a jug wrapped in cloth and hangs it in the wind. It's enough. Not to reverse the decline, not to rebuild the empire of chill, but to remember. And maybe, just maybe, to begin again, night has returned. But not the same night as before. Now the air holds a warmth that feels settled in, less scorching, more baked in like the stone walls themselves have grown fond of it. You drift through Yazd one last time, following faint smells of cardamom and clay, past low doorways and soft pools of moonlight pooling in every uneven courtyard. You're on your way to meet someone, an architect, or maybe just a tea vendor with opinions. The line is blurred out here between craft and conversation. You find him seated on a carpet just outside a modest cafe. His teapot rests atop a small clay stove, and beside it, a notebook filled with sketches of domes and ducks and little arrows showing airflow. He waves you over without looking up. Sit, you're late. The air has been waiting. You sit. I heard you've been chasing cold things, he says, pouring tea into a ceramic cup. Let me tell you what's left. You expect nostalgia, maybe lament, but instead you get pride. We still build wind catchers, he says. Smaller, yes, less ornate, but they work. Some modern homes in Yazd have them, blended into the walls like bones beneath the skin. You can't always see them, but they breathe. He pours you a second cup before you finish the first. That seems to be the custom here. And the qanats, he adds, many still run. The ones in use have been repaired with concrete. Not elegant? No, but they flow. You ask about the yakhchals. He nods. A few still stand. One is used to store saffron in summer. Another, believe it or not, keeps drinks for weddings. Guests come from the city to see how the old cold feels. You smile. He returns it. Historians, he says, often miss the quiet survival of things. They track what dies, not what adapts. But in Yazd, adaptation is the tradition. In school, they teach us about passive cooling. They show us old blueprints. My cousin helped design a hotel based on a yakhchal. The ventilation alone dropped indoor temperatures by 8 degrees. He lifts his teacup. And guess what they serve in the lobby? You sip. Cold pomegranate wine, he says, grinning. Well, non-alcoholic these days, but the tradition holds. Around you the night deepens. Lamps flicker gently. Somewhere a water wheel creaks, likely for drama more than function. You ask him what he thinks is next. He leans back, staring at the stars, still sharp, still cool, still unbothered. I think, he says slowly, people are beginning to remember what the earth already knew. That heat can be softened, that walls can breathe. That coal doesn't have to hum or click or be bought in a plastic bag. It can be earned. You finish your tea. You don't want to go. But the story is winding down like a pot reaching the last simmer. He hands you a small token, a clay medallion, carved with 3 things, a dome, a tower, and a ripple of water. For balance, he says. You stand, stepping away slowly, letting the coolness of the night press against your skin like an old friend returning. As you walk through Yazd, you notice things you missed before. Cloth still damp, fluttering on balconies. A narrow passageway designed to catch every hint of breeze. A toddler drinking from a clay pot, wiping his mouth with both hands and smiling like he invented thirst. And everywhere the ghost of chill. Not haunting, just waiting. Waiting in vents in stones, in shaded corners and deep wells. In every carved arch and half-rebuilt dome. In the lessons left by snow cutters and wine pourers and women fanning date towers with cloths soaked in qanat water. You reach the hilltop one final time and look out over the rooftops. Windcatchers rise like ancient sails, some broken, some whole. Beneath them, the city sleeps and the earth remembers. You feel it, deep and gentle. Not an end, but a rhythm continuing, not gone. Just cooling off. So now, as the desert night settles into its quiet rhythm, you can let go of the road. The caravans have long since passed. The banquet tables are cleared. The jugs are empty, but still cool to the touch. You've wandered through shadowed domes, cooled your palms in mountain meltwater, and sipped chilled wine beneath stars sharp enough to cut silk. Let the memory of snow stored in silence drift across your thoughts like fine dust. Let the rhythm of Connaught water lull you, its slow, purposeful flow whispering beneath cities that never needed to shout. And let the wind, the clever, catching wind, slide gently through your dreams, cooling you not with force but with patience. The ancient Persians knew that cold wasn't a thing to conquer. It was something to keep, to coax, to borrow from the mountains, carry through the desert, and preserve, brick by brick, shade by shade, breath by breath. Tonight you've traveled far without moving, and now the yakhchals are quiet. The wind catchers are still. The city sleeps, and so should you. So close your eyes. Let the last of the wine settle, and remember, the chill is never gone. It's just beneath the surface, waiting for dawn.